Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror TV series named Masters of Horror Season 1, Part 2. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The seventh story, titled Jennifer, begins with police officer Frank having dinner with his partner. He felt stifled and decided to step out for some fresh air. He hadn't gone far when he saw a man forcing a woman. He wanted to call his partner over, but his partner hadn't heard him because the music was too loud. Since the situation was urgent, Frank chased after them alone. He tried to get the man to stop, but the man didn't listen and even said Frank didn't understand anything. The man then prepared to kill the woman, so Frank had no choice but to shoot him dead. When the man suddenly woke up during the inspection, he used his last strength to say Jennifer to Frank. By the time his partner arrived, the man had already died. Frank saw the woman crying and kindly comforted her, only to be startled by her horribly disfigured face. Although he was scratched by the woman while untying her, he still saved her. His partner called backups at the same time. According to the regulations, police officers need psychological counseling after shooting someone, so Frank had no choice but to comply. Due to the severity of the incident, his superior temporarily suspended him. The woman he saved showed a strange smile as he left. Frank couldn't stop thinking about it. Since the woman he saved never spoke and had no identification, they could only guess her name was Jennifer. The police had to place Jennifer in a mental hospital. The man Frank killed used to be a successful businessman. However, for some unknown reason, he became poor and destitute, abandoned by his friends and family. Even in death, there were no relatives to lay him to rest. It was unknown whether these changes were because of Jennifer. Upon seeing Jennifer being mistreated by the staff, Frank decided to take good care of her, hoping to help her adapt to society sooner. As soon as he brought Jennifer home, she showed affection towards Frank, which reassured him that she had feelings. That night, Jennifer came to Frank's room because she couldn't sleep. As he tried to comfort her, his wife discovered Jennifer and was terrified by her appearance. Their son also mocked Jennifer, calling her a beast. Things escalated when Jennifer suddenly bit Frank's wife, making them even more unable to accept her. Helplessly, Frank took her to the outskirts of town. When no one was around, Jennifer seduced Frank, who couldn't resist her hormone temptation, and they became intimate. After that, Frank decided to bring her back home and make her part of the family. As he attempted to persuade his wife, Jennifer suddenly barged into the house. They then heard a cat's horrifying scream coming from the room Jennifer was in. They rushed over and were shocked to find Jennifer eating their pet cat alive. Unable to bear this, Frank's wife and son left him behind and moved away. Although Frank wanted to discipline Jennifer, he couldn't bring himself to do so. Jennifer seemed to know how to keep Frank's heart and continued to seduce him, and he couldn't control himself, foreshadowing a tragic end. One day, Jennifer discovered a little girl from a neighboring family. The girl didn't care about Jennifer's disfigured face and politely greeted her, but Jennifer didn't let her off the hook. That night, Frank returned home to the scent of blood. He followed the smell and opened the basement door, only to find Jennifer had eaten the little girl alive. This drove Frank crazy. He tried to kill Jennifer, but he couldn't bring himself to do it and spared her once again. Afterward, a circus owner who specialized in deformed performers learned of Frank's plight and took an interest in Jennifer. Frank didn't want to sell Jennifer himself, so he handed the keys to the circus owner and told him to capture her. However, when Frank returned home, all he found was the circus owner's half-eaten corpse. With 2 lives already taken, Jennifer could no longer stay there, so Frank took her to leave their small town behind. In the end, the 2 of them arrived at a forest. There was a small cabin in the woods, which became a shelter for the pair. They were going to live there for a long time. Since Jennifer had a huge appetite, Frank had to find work in the neighboring town to provide for their meals. Although the supermarket owner wanted to hire a cheap graduate, she eventually agreed to help Frank after his persistent requests. Thus, Frank became a handyman at the supermarket. Although all the money Frank earned was spent on food, Jennifer still couldn't get enough to eat and often woke up hungry in the night. One day, the supermarket owner's son Pete was going to attend a bonfire party and couldn't watch the store at night. Frank decided to help him and earn the respect of others. While Frank was working with the supermarket owner, Jennifer saw all of this. Frank was spending so much time with the supermarket owner, and she couldn't accept it and felt that she had fallen out of favor. That night at the bonfire party, Pete was encouraged by his friends to find a partner. He wandered around and found a lonely girl, approaching her to strike up a conversation. To his surprise, the girl ran away upon seeing him. The girl quickly led Pete into the depths of the forest. Little did he know that this girl was actually Jennifer. In order to take revenge on the supermarket owner, she decided to torture Pete to death. After finishing work and returning home, Frank heard crying coming from the basement next to the house. He rushed to the basement only to find Jennifer had eaten Pete. He thought he could change Jennifer, but it was too difficult to tame her. He couldn't forgive her any longer. To make up for his past mistakes, Frank decided to kill Jennifer. He took Jennifer to the forest, and just as he was about to act, a passing forest ranger stopped him. Without a word, the ranger shot and killed Frank. With his last bit of strength, Frank called out to Jennifer. Although Jennifer's disfigured face frightened the ranger, after hesitating for a moment, he took her back to his home. The ranger hoped to help Jennifer adapt to society, and so began a new loop. The 8th story, titled Chocolate, begins with a shot of Jamie, who was a food and spice mixer with an incredibly sensitive sense of smell. Jamie led a very regular life. He hardly participated in any social activities and occasionally visited his son at his ex-wife's house. Although living alone in a bachelor apartment was quite depressing, he had grown used to it. As usual, he made a simple late-night snack for himself, watched some Daniel C.C. horror movies, and then went to bed without washing his smelly body. In the middle of the night, Jamie suddenly tasted chocolate in his mouth while he was asleep. He thought he was dreaming of eating sweets, but when he woke up, the taste was still there. He felt as if he was eating someone else's chocolate. The following day, Jamie went to his ex-wife's house to visit his son. He could tell that his ex-wife had a new boyfriend as there were love bites on her neck. His son didn't understand the meaning of divorce and thought Jamie would move back in. Jamie didn't know how to explain this to him. Since his son had to attend dance class, Jamie's trip was in vain. With nowhere else to go, Jamie headed to a bar recommended by a coworker. Although he came to show support, Jamie couldn't appreciate his coworker's band's music. It was too loud, so he blocked his ears with his hands. Before long, a friend of his coworker approached Jamie to chat. Jamie intended to perform a magic trick as requested, but suddenly realized he had gone deaf and couldn't hear anything. He quickly tried to explain to them, but they didn't understand him. His actions scared his friend away. After a while, his hearing suddenly returned to normal. When his coworker finished performing, Jamie gave him a ride home. After only a short conversation, his coworker started to doze off. At that moment, Jamie suddenly had a hallucination. He saw a different city outside the car window. He quickly woke up his coworker, telling him he couldn't see. His coworker quickly took control of the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding a collision with the car in front. Surprisingly, his coworker remained calm, finding the situation thrilling. Late at night, Jamie, fast asleep, suddenly saw a man's face. Thinking there was a thief in his house, he looked around. He saw the man again, but when he turned on the light, the man disappeared. Jamie spent the night frightened and on edge. While shopping at the supermarket, Jamie met a girl who shared his passion for a healthy lifestyle. They hit it off, and Jamie quickly brought her home for hormone therapy. They became increasingly intimate, ending up in bed together. But Jamie suddenly felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and had to stop. The next day, Jamie woke up and coughed, experiencing another hallucination. He saw the same man again, but this time, he was a lady in the illusion. Then, Jamie suddenly felt like he was being pinned down by a strong man. In the hallucination, he was doing smelly exercise with the man. Although it was an illusion, Jamie could feel the sensation vividly. His actions woke up the girl, who didn't understand what Jamie was doing. At that moment, his ex-wife arrived with their son to visit him. The girl quickly put on her pants when she heard the noise. When his ex-wife opened the bedroom door, she saw the disheveled girl and Jamie, who was convulsing. Speechless, his ex-wife left with their son. Not long after, Jamie returned to normal. The girl thought Jamie was faking illness and left. While shaving, Jamie coughed and experienced another hallucination. This time, he saw himself writing a love letter. Later at work, Jamie saw another hallucination of himself and realized that everything he had seen and felt in his previous visions all stemmed from the lady named Catherine. He immediately shared this with his coworker, but they didn't believe him and suggested he see a doctor. Jamie believed Catherine was calling out to him, so he began investigating her identity. During one of his hallucinations, he saw Catherine's car. Not long after, Catherine discovered her boyfriend was cheating on her. Although she despised him, she couldn't do anything about it. Eventually, she found an opportunity during an intimate moment and successfully killed her boyfriend. Jamie witnessed this and hastened his investigation. While watching TV one day, Jamie saw Catherine's car, just like he had seen in the vision. Since the license plate was shown in a close-up, it made finding her much easier. Using the various images he had seen before, Jamie deduced Catherine's location and went there. He then saw a newspaper article about the boyfriend's murder and went to his art studio, only to find Catherine had just left. Jamie quickly noted down her license plate number and found her home. Although Catherine didn't know Jamie, he still sent her favorite chocolates. When Catherine saw the chocolates, she was upset as they reminded her of her deceased boyfriend. The next day, Jamie began following Catherine, who eventually agreed to meet him. Jamie admitted he was smitten with Catherine at first sight and wanted to get to know her. Catherine initially thought Jamie knew she was a murderer, but later realized he seemed like a clumsy, harmless guy. Under Jamie's persistent persuasion, Catherine agreed to have lunch with him. Jamie believed Catherine wasn't at fault and didn't mind that she was a murderer. He even confessed that he could occasionally share her vision and touch. However, Catherine couldn't accept such an absurd story and didn't believe Jamie. On their way back, Jamie spotted the police and stopped Catherine, telling her to hide. Finally, she believed him, as it seemed Jamie truly knew everything about her. Jamie promised Catherine that everything he had done was for her because he genuinely cared for her. The two established a hormone ship. However, during an intimate but smelly moment, Catherine suddenly pulled out a gun. She didn't actually believe Jamie's feelings were genuine and thought he had ulterior motives. Jamie could only protest his innocence. When Catherine was determined to kill him, Jamie had no choice but to fight back. During the struggle, Jamie realized Catherine had drugged him with sleeping pills earlier, leaving him unable to exert much strength. But Catherine had some weapons at home, allowing Jamie to fight her. Jamie injured Catherine's hand and grabbed the gun. Just as he was about to shoot, another vision appeared. He saw from Catherine's perspective that the gun wasn't aimed at her. Catherine lunged at him, and Jamie fired several shots, finally killing her. Later, the police arrived and took Jamie away. When they asked about the incident, Jamie recounted the entire story. Naturally, the police didn't believe him, but his injuries still needed treatment. The ending didn't reveal Jamie's fate, but it seems that he would possibly end up in a psychiatric hospital. The ninth story, titled Homecoming, begins at a late night when David was driving with Jane, trying to escape. After traveling some distance, they noticed a person with crutches up ahead. Without hesitation, Jane grabbed the wheel and steered the car towards the pedestrian. It turned out that the pedestrian was a zombie. Although they managed to knock the zombie away, their car broke down and could no longer continue. Not long after, a military truck approached them. Jane thought they were about to be rescued, but instead, the vehicle was filled with zombies. Jane quickly grabbed a gun, preparing to shoot the zombies in the legs to slow them down since bullets couldn't kill them. However, just as she was loading the gun, David suddenly pulled out a pistol and ended Jane's life himself. 1 month earlier, David had met Jane, a female writer, on a talk show. At the time, David was re-election campaigning for the president as his spokesperson and speechwriter. The presidential election was just 3 weeks away. The president had launched the war in Iraq, which resulted in the deaths of many civilians and soldiers. Consequently, there were many voices of opposition. Soon, these anti-war activists were arrested. The host asked David whether the president had the right to take such measures against those opposed to the war. David gave a smooth, non-committal answer. Jane, on the other hand, bluntly stated that these anti-war activists were just a bunch of stupid people who only knew how to hate their country and sought attention by appearing on TV. During the show, a video was aired featuring the arrest of anti-war activists. During the call-in segment, a mother said her son had died in the war in Iraq. She had tried to confront the president, asking why her son had died, but the president dismissed her without answering. Even after the war ended and no weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq, the president still refused to admit his mistakes. Hearing this, David suddenly thought of his brother who had died in Vietnam. Overwhelmed with emotion, he said he hoped this mother's son could come back because he sacrificed himself for the safety of all Americans. However, the mother disagreed with David. Just as she was about to express her opinion, the call was cut off. After the incident, Jane praised David for his moving speech. She said he was good at stirring the emotions of the audience and diverting the main contradiction. David, however, replied that he spoke from his true feelings, not for any particular purpose. Jane was very open and bold. Under her active pursuit, the two soon became a couple. The president thought David's speech was excellent. He then echoed David's words, hoping that the soldiers who died in the war could come back, a tactic to win votes. After all, the dead couldn't really return to life. During the night shift, a guard heard movement coming from the coffins containing the soldiers' remains. In no time, the soldiers inside the coffins began to resurrect. Bullets did little harm to them, so the guard was unable to stop them. When his colleague heard the commotion and rushed over, he accidentally killed the guard while trying to shoot the resurrected soldiers. As his colleague was waiting to meet Jesus, the resurrected soldiers told him to relax. It turned out that these resurrected soldiers had no ill intentions. One day, while David and his mother were paying respects to his deceased brother, the mother said that her friend had seen her son yesterday, who had died in the war. They didn't take it seriously, but as they were about to leave, David noticed someone digging a grave and stopped the person. Unexpectedly, it was a resurrected soldier. More soldiers soon approached, so David and his mother got in their car and fled, narrowly escaping danger. Shortly after, the president's henchman called David, asking him to come urgently. The military had captured a resurrected soldier and began researching them. They found that these soldiers had a strong life force, and even if they were cut into pieces, each piece could still function. If they could be used in war, the army would be invincible. However, the situation took a turn the next day when a resurrected soldier went to a voting spot. He showed his personal belongings to prove his identity and then followed the voting process to choose his ideal president. Shortly after casting his vote, the soldier collapsed and died for good. The news quickly spread, and some experts claimed it was a miracle, God voting through the resurrected soldier. Jane disagreed, saying that the soldier's resurrection occurred 2 days after the president's speech, so it's the president who should be credited. When asked if such voting was legal, she explained that their current state couldn't be considered completely dead, and as heroes who sacrificed their lives for their country, they should have the right to vote. The supporters initially thought these resurrected soldiers were on the president's side, but it turned out they weren't. The resurrected soldiers accused the president of being cold-blooded, sacrificing so many for his own selfish desires in an unnecessary war. They watched their comrades fall one by one and vowed to support anti-war activists. Their votes would only go to those who could end the war. Not long after, these resurrected soldiers were arrested by the government forces. The authorities claimed that the soldiers carried a pathogen that posed a threat to public health, so they had no choice but to isolate them. When the host asked about voting again, Jane explained that the intelligence level of these resurrected soldiers wasn't very high, and since they were dead, they were not eligible to vote according to the law. She also called them frauds and suggested the best solution was to imprison them. Meanwhile, a lone resurrected soldier received a warm welcome from the owner of a coffee shop who had lost his own son in the war, just like the soldier. The owner could understand their actions and didn't treat the resurrected soldiers as monsters. At the same time, the president's henchman was furious, wondering why these resurrected soldiers weren't like the zombies in movies, consuming human brains. They either stayed put or wandered around aimlessly, causing the henchman headaches as he couldn't find an excuse to take action. More importantly, the president's votes remained low, and if this continued, it would be over. The henchman wondered why the resurrected soldiers didn't support them. David speculated that it might be because of their beliefs that they didn't die for their cause, so they'll come back. Unless they could find a resurrected soldier who was proud of this war and could help them speak positively about it, they were stuck. Hearing this, the henchman immediately went to the quarantine area and brought out a resurrected soldier named Gordon. Gordon was reluctant to speak since he had been in pain since his resurrection. They tried to trick him into signing a statement supporting the president, but Gordon wasn't foolish and threw the statement away after reading it carefully. The henchman then called Gordon's mother to convince her son. Her voice was trembling and tearful, indicating she was under threat. Although she persuaded Gordon, she also said to do something that their conscience could bear. With that, Gordon pretended to sign the statement, and when the henchman reached to pick up the pen, Gordon suddenly attacked him. By the time soldiers arrived, the henchman was already dead. Seizing the opportunity, David pulled out his phone and ordered the men to spare Gordon's mother. The quarantine area was quickly exposed, and more people took notice. David had no choice but to announce that the soldiers would be released the following Monday, allowing them to participate in the vote. The resurrected soldiers were eventually set free and given the right to vote. David had previously mentioned that his brother had died in the war. However, someone searched the casualty lists and couldn't find his brother's name. David didn't know how to explain this, so he turned to his mother for answers. It turns out, after joining the war, his brother's personality had changed drastically, and he spent his days locked in his room. One day, David walked in on his brother just as he was about to terminate himself. Later, when his brother was out, David took his handgun, intending to play a game with him. He didn't expect the gun to be loaded and accidentally killed his brother. To prevent David from blaming himself, his mother lied and said his brother had died on the battlefield. On the day of the vote, the resurrected soldiers cast their ballots for the candidate they were satisfied with and then peacefully passed away. However, it didn't make a difference because the vote counting was in the hands of the president's men. As a result, the president was re-elected. During the celebration, Jane told David that she had taken David's place, meaning he was fired. At that moment, roars of anger erupted from the graves, and all the soldiers who had died in the war were resurrected. They quickly stormed into the city, leading to the scene as shown at the beginning of the story. After killing Jane, David prepared to end his shitty life, only to find the gun was empty. The resurrected soldiers felt deceived. They were told they had the right to vote, but their votes ended up being worthless. Now, they wanted to assimilate David. David's brother then appeared. Although he knew David had tried his best, he still took David's life. In the end, the resurrected soldiers took control of the living world and gained political power. Anyone who dared to provoke war would be taught a lesson by them, so they would understand the cruelty of war. The 10th story, titled John Carpenter's Cigarette Burns, begins with a movie theater owner named Kirby, who received an invitation from a crazy film collector named Bellinger. After a brief conversation, Kirby discovered a rare movie poster named The Absolute End of the World. The film was rumored to have only been screened once, but it caused a serious, violent incident. On the night of the premiere, the theater became hell on earth. The director stole a copy afterward, intending to send it abroad, but the government ordered its destruction. As a result, only a few people had ever seen the film. Bellinger told Kirby that the movie hadn't actually been destroyed by the government. Kirby then noticed a piece of decoration on the wall. Bellinger explained that it was from the movie. Getting to the point, Bellinger told Kirby that he was very interested in the rare film and hoped Kirby could help him find the original, which had likely been destroyed, but a copy must still exist in the world. Bellinger then showed Kirby another collectible, a wild angel. The angel's wings had been cut off by him and hung on the wall as decoration. Why did Bellinger know that a copy must still exist? Because the wild angel came from that movie, and if even the copy had been destroyed, the angel would disappear along with it. Now Bellinger desperately wanted to watch the film. He had previously researched Kirby's theater, which was on the verge of closing, so he promised Kirby that if he could find a copy of the film, he would give him $100,000. What's more, he would also let Kirby screen it at his theater for free for 2 weeks. After thinking for a while, Kirby raised the price to $200,000, and so they made a deal. After returning to the movie theater, Kirby told the projectionist about the upcoming screening of The Absolute End of the World and asked him to prepare. The projectionist, familiar with the film, was excited. Late at night, Kirby thought about his deceased girlfriend. Her father, Walter, didn't like Kirby, but she always spoke highly of him. Walter eventually lent Kirby $200,000 to buy the second-hand theater. Perhaps because Walter constantly tried to break them up, the girlfriend became overwhelmed and terminated herself. After her death, Kirby and Walter had a falling out, each blaming the other for her death. Now, Walter asked Kirby to repay the $200,000 within a week, or else he would resort to violence. That's why he was in urgent need of money. Thanks to the information provided by Bellinger, Kirby began his search and discovered that a renowned film critic had reviewed The Absolute End of the World, meaning the critic must have seen the movie. Perhaps there would be a clue in his review. Following the lead, Kirby quickly found the critic, who still had the review from that time. However, the critic was unwilling to help Kirby, as he believed the film was dangerous. Undeterred, Kirby started reading the review he found. The critic then told him that the director of the film was practically a terrorist, and the movie was made to slaughter the audience. Kirby thought this was a rumor, but the critic insisted that the truth was even worse than the rumors. The critic had interviewed the director and recorded their conversation, which he brought out upon learning about Kirby's mission. He also wanted to watch the film again, despite knowing its horrifying nature. Kirby listened to the recording and fell asleep, dreaming of his girlfriend's gruesome death. The next day, he shared his mission with a friend, who urged him to stop. Although the friend had some leads, he didn't want to tell Kirby and advised him to investigate on his own. After finding information about the film, Kirby was shocked to discover that apart from the director and the cinematographer, all other crew members involved in the movie had died. When he asked about the cinematographer, he learned that his friend knew him. The cinematographer had gone blind shortly after filming and had refused ever since to talk about the movie or the director. He would fight anyone who dared to ask. While there were no explicit records, the friend told Kirby that the director was dead, though he didn't want to elaborate further. Not long after Kirby left, his friend told others about his investigation, which made Kirby furious. One evening, Kirby made a special trip to confront his friend about the information he had shared. The friend claimed that he was only concerned for Kirby's safety. Like Kirby, his friend had once been driven by curiosity, and it had cost him dearly. It turns out years ago, the friend had been a projectionist and had screened the very movie in question. However, shortly after the film started, he lost his senses. All he could vaguely remember were the blood-soaked scenes inside the theater. He had tried to shut off the projector, but it wouldn't turn off. Just as he was about to take out the film copy, he saw a mysterious light ring. When he finally regained consciousness, he discovered that his hand was ruined. After hearing this, Kirby promised his friend that he would never watch the film, let alone screen it publicly. As long as he could get the copy, he would hand it over to Bellinger and take the money. With Kirby's promise, his friend gave him a phone number. The owner of the number didn't have a copy of the film, but he had collected several other works made by the same director. After contacting the number, Kirby followed his instructions and arrived in a small foreign town. This time, he was looking for a bald man who had once had contact with the said director. The bald man had a high opinion of the director and had always wanted to make his own film. However, he detested the hypocrisy of Hollywood and refused to join that circle. Kirby then opened a wooden box nearby, finding several stills from the absolute end of the world. As he looked at them, several henchmen suddenly grabbed Kirby, and the bald man injected him with something. When Kirby woke up again, the bald man had transformed into a dark version of himself. The dark bald man killed an innocent woman, and then planned to kill Kirby. Just as Kirby was in imminent danger, he suddenly woke up. It turned out that everything that had happened after looking at the stills had been an illusion. In reality, Kirby had killed everyone in the room while unconscious, including the bald man. Confused, Kirby interrogated the bald man, but he couldn't get any useful information out of him. Having no other choice, he took away the relevant materials from the scene. Based on these materials, Kirby found the director's wife. She guessed Kirby's intentions, and after a brief introduction, she told him that her husband had become obsessed with the film, immersing himself in an illusory world. In the end, he chose to take his own life. Before doing so, he even tried to kill his wife, but she was fortunate enough to escape death. From then on, she harbored a deep hatred for her husband and the film. Now that Kirby wanted to take the film copy, she was more than happy to oblige. And so, Kirby got the copy from the director's wife and successfully handed it over to Bellinger. After returning to the movie theater, Kirby informed the projectionist to come to work the next morning. Soon after, he received a call from Bellinger. Not far away, Walter was closely monitoring Kirby's every move. Kirby rushed over after receiving the call, only to find the badly injured butler. It seemed that the film had already brought disaster, as the butler had uncontrollably destroyed his own eyes. Witnessing this scene, Kirby immediately went to Bellinger's private cinema. At this point, Bellinger was already somewhat delirious, saying that Kirby had missed the real show. After a brief conversation, Bellinger ended his own life. Just then, Walter arrived and said that he had spent a lot of time observing Kirby and had not been mistaken. In his eyes, Kirby was a psychotic killer. Now, he wanted to kill Kirby with his own hands. As Kirby and Walter struggled for the gun, the mysterious light ring appeared again. When they regained consciousness, they saw the film playing on the screen. The film had almost no main content, just some scattered fragments, including the process of cutting off an angel's wings. On the other side, the blind butler fumbled and handed the keys to unlock the shackles to the angel. At this moment, Walter experienced a hallucination where he saw his daughter frantically biting him. Kirby realized that he and Walter both missed the girl and didn't want her to leave. It was as if she was always with them, but she had died in their minds again and again. This endless torment could only be ended by their deaths. After beating up Walter, Kirby handed him the check. Finally, Kirby looked at the illusion of his girlfriend and ended his life. The angel holding the film copy came to the private cinema and thanked the deceased Kirby. The story ended there, signifying that the real horror of a film could evoke people's most painful memories, triggering anger and fear. This film might be the devil's masterpiece, with the director merely a pawn spreading pain. The real horror was the trauma in the audience's hearts, rather than the images on the screen. The 11th story, titled The Fair-Haired Child, begins with an introverted girl named Tara, who often faces ostracism from her classmates because she doesn't fit in. She doesn't have any friends at her school, and her presence goes unnoticed. One day, while walking home, Tara is followed by a group of criminals. They had been watching her for quite some time and purposely caused a car accident to injure her. They then drugged Tara and dragged her into their vehicle. When Tara wakes up, she finds herself in a hospital. A nurse tells her that she was found unconscious by the side of the road and brought to the hospital. Shockingly, this hospital is in another state. Tara calls her mother to explain her situation, but her mother is nonchalant about it. After Tara repeatedly pleads for help, her mother impatiently says she will grab a pen and then hangs up the phone. Tara is left hopeless. Under the guise of checking Tara's health, the nurse asks her some questions. At first, the questions seem normal, but they gradually become stranger, even going as far as asking if Tara is a virgin. Tara realizes something is wrong when the nurse addresses her by her full name, which she has never revealed, and it wasn't written on her assignment book or textbooks either. The nurse drops the act, telling Tara that there is no escape, as the nearest house is 5 kilometers away, and the address she was given earlier was fake. As Tara tries to escape through the front door, she runs into a house, and she is caught once again. To prevent her from running away, they lock her in the basement. After resting for a while, Tara regains some strength and begins to examine the basement. In no time, she discovers a young boy named Johnny hanging by a rope. Tara saves Johnny, who appears to be a victim as well. She wants to ask him about the situation, but it turns out Johnny is mute. Fortunately, he can still hear, so communicating isn't too difficult. The two find a message on the wall saying, "Please leave before it wakes up." Tara is unsure of the meaning behind these words. Suddenly, a strong wind blows and Johnny experiences great discomfort. However, he soon recovers. Tara then discovers several more warnings, all implying that they should leave the dangerous place as soon as possible. On the other side, the house owner somewhat regrets the things he's done. However, his wife persuades him that they cannot stop now since they've come this far. Meanwhile, Tara and Johnny find many backpacks in the basement. The student IDs inside reveal that the previous victims were all female students like Tara, but they had already perished. Tara realizes how dangerous her situation is. Soon after, Johnny starts feeling unwell again. To help him, Tara warms him with her hot body. It's revealed that the couple are both famous musicians. Once, while celebrating their son's birthday, he asked to go boating. The mother warned him but let him go anyway. Unfortunately, their son fell into the lake and drowned, as none of them could swim and the husband had a fear of water. Later, they learned witchcraft from an unknown source and successfully awakened a sleeping demon. The demon had the power to resurrect their son, but at the cost that they needed to find 12 young virgins as sacrifices, offering one each year on this day. Upon the mother's agreement, their son immediately entered a zombie-like state. As it turns out, their son was none other than Johnny. Seeing Johnny growing weaker, Tara tries to keep him awake by telling him horror stories. However, Johnny ultimately succumbs to his weakness. In anger, Tara loudly accuses the evil couple. As she tries to escape, Johnny's body undergoes a transformation, turning into a demon. Tara distracts him with a thrown object and hides in a stove. Eventually, Johnny finds her, but luckily the stove's pipes can accommodate Tara, allowing her to escape danger. Once it's quiet, Tara gathers her courage and climbs out. Johnny has returned to normal, but he's still trying to kill himself. But he's not truly alive, so he can't die again. After seeing the books Johnny provides, Tara understands everything. In his zombie-like state, Johnny's memory is poor, so he only has a vague impression of the evil his parents have done. He knows they've harmed many people because of him, and he feels guilty. Now, he doesn't want Tara to die like this, but he's powerless to stop it. Soon, Johnny will transform again. Tara hopes he can endure it with sheer willpower, but it's a futile wish. After Johnny transforms again, he tears Tara to onion pieces. Before dying, she writes, "I don't blame you," in blood. With that, Johnny's resurrection ritual is complete, and he finally becomes human again. However, he's not happy. Even though his parents play elegant music, he can sense their evil through it. Seeing Johnny's odd behavior, the mother thinks their son hasn't fully recovered. Before long, a strong wind fills the room, and Tara, now transformed into a demon, bursts through the door. It turns out that Johnny had secretly made a pact with the demon without his parents' knowledge. The demon promised Johnny that he could resurrect Tara in exchange for his parents' lives. In the end, Johnny and Tara lived happily ever after. The 12th story, titled Dear Woman, begins in a town where a series of mysterious events have been occurring recently, and witnesses claim to have seen someone disappear out of thin air on the streets. Officer Jacob has been instructed by his superiors to investigate these strange occurrences, along with Detective Faraday. This area is not usually under Faraday's jurisdiction, but the person who reported the incident called Faraday's emergency line, so they have no choice but to come and investigate. Upon inspecting the scene, Faraday believes that the truck door was destroyed by a force from inside, which then tried to restore the door. They decide to take a look inside the truck, but strangely, all they find is a pile of bloody flesh. Upon closer examination, Faraday discovers human tissue within the pile, making it clear that this case involves a murder. After identifying the victim, Faraday goes to question a witness. The bar owner had seen the victim before. He mentions that the victim left the bar with a stunningly beautiful woman after getting drunk. The bar owner had never seen such a beautiful woman before and was left with a deep impression. This woman appeared to be of Indian descent, and any man who saw her would be captivated. Local police arrive and want to take over the case from Faraday, even teasing him a bit. Later, Faraday is assigned a new task to handle an old man's pet monkey biting an elderly woman's dog. This case doesn't seem to have much investigative value, so Faraday is somewhat distracted and begins to ponder the details of the previous case and the murderer's methods. The forensic examiner tells Faraday that the victim suffered severe trauma, as if being run over by a truck repeatedly. The victim had engaged in sexual activity before dying, and their valuables were taken afterward. However, Faraday believes the killer is an animal because hoof prints were found on the victim. On the other hand, the Indian beauty begins to lure her prey again. Just as the bar owner had said, any man would lose their resistance to such an exquisite beauty. Although the woman doesn't say a single word, it doesn't hinder the progress between her and her target. Meanwhile, Faraday and the forensic examiner are arguing about the details of the case, but neither can convince the other. The case is so bizarre that no matter how they try to explain it, there are always some inconsistencies. After returning home, Faraday continues to contemplate the case. Based on the clues left at the scene, Faraday starts to speculate that the weapon the Indian beauty used to commit the crime may have been a deer's hoof. However, it seems unlikely the victim would not have a chance to fight back when attacked by a deer's hoof. So he speculated that the killer likely disguised himself as a deer, and after killing the victim, they kidnapped the Indian beauty. The truck door might have also been fixed by the killer. The next day, Jacob received a report of another body, with the body parts arranged in the shape of a hamburger. The death pattern was similar to the previous one, but there were a few deer hairs at the scene. Witnesses mentioned the same Indian beauty from before. The victim was trampled by deer hooves with great force, which couldn't be made by a woman. Meanwhile, another victim was brought in. Since the body was incomplete, Faraday and Jacob rushed to the crime scene and found the victim's arm. The local police were unwilling to share information. Faraday had to search on his own while Jacob dealt with the local police. However, Faraday was discovered and the investigation was forced to a halt. On his way home, Faraday was robbed by a criminal, but fortunately, he wounded him and told him to find a proper job. Just then, the Indian beauty appeared in the shadows. The local police were as clueless as Faraday. Although the victims were killed by hooves, there were no known animals with hooves that had such power. They speculated that an unknown animal might be responsible for the crimes. After some deliberation, the higher-ups finally decided to hand the case over to Faraday. Meanwhile, the forensic examiner extracted deer DNA from the hoof prints at the crime scene. This means that Faraday's speculation was right, and the killer was indeed an animal. Faraday accompanied Jacob to an Indian casino, where Faraday shared that he had accidentally killed his partner during a previous operation and felt guilty, so he left the homicide division. He was later transferred to a department that dealt with animal attacks. While discussing the previous case, a passing waiter showed interest. He told them that his parents once told him a legend of a creature called the Deer Woman. With the upper body of a human and the lower body of a deer, the Deer Woman lured men, only to kill them after becoming intimate. Perhaps the case Faraday and Jacob were discussing was the work of the Deer Woman. Jacob believed that legends were true, so he believed in the existence of the Deer Woman. However, Faraday thought it was just a tall tale. One day, Jacob met the Indian beauty at an Indian casino. She was the legendary Deer Woman, and Jacob was captivated by her charm. While they were in a hotel room, Faraday called to discuss the case. Jacob told him he was busy with a woman and didn't have time for it. Faraday advised him to check her feet since Jacob believed in the existence of the Deer Woman. Suddenly, the call was disconnected, and Faraday rushed over. By the time he arrived, it was too late. As Faraday called for help, the Deer Woman appeared, but Faraday heard her and shot her. He was shocked to confirm that she was indeed the Deer Woman. Since she was a legendary creature with superpowers, she couldn't be killed easily. After kicking Faraday away, she escaped. Faraday then chased her down in his car. The Deer Woman was slow, so she was soon caught up to. She kicked the police car away and hid in the forest, hoping to escape with the help of a deer herd. In self-defense, Faraday shot a deer dead. He soon found the Deer Woman again. He then charged at her. She still didn't die and even tried to crush Faraday with a car. After several shots, Faraday finally drove her away. It seems like the Deer Woman disappeared for good, and Faraday could finally relax when his colleagues arrived. The 13th story, titled Pick Me Up, begins with a passenger bus that broke down and couldn't continue its journey. The passengers had to get off and wait, and a passing driver told them there was an inn nearby where they could stay for the night. Stacia, heartbroken from a past relationship, maintained her distance from others and seemed cold. Shortly after she left, a red truck passed by. After learning about the situation, the truck driver named Wheeler offered to give the passengers a lift. The bus driver couldn't leave the broken-down bus, so a couple, Marie and her husband, argued about whether to get on the truck. Thinking there would be some danger, the couple chose to stay behind. In the end, only Bertie and Danny got on the truck. Due to the remote location, they didn't encounter any other vehicles. Back with the bus driver, a lost traveler, Walker, found him and asked for a ride. Walker expressed regret after learning about the situation. While chatting with the driver, it was revealed that Walker was a snake fanatic, and the snake he was holding was the same one the driver had killed earlier. The driver was shocked when Walker suddenly attacked him with the snake, strangling him to death. After that, he picked up the driver's gun and killed Marie's husband. He then deliberately let Marie escape, as he enjoyed watching his prey panic and run. On the other side, Wheeler and his group arrived safely at the service area. Wheeler replenished some supplies, saying that he had put the good stuff into the truck. He then invited Bertie inside to play some bird game. Meanwhile, Walker and Marie were playing hide-and-seek in the woods. Like many horror movies, no matter how far the victims run, the killer always catches up. Danny was worried about the passengers they had left behind, so he suggested picking them up. Wheeler reluctantly agreed and took him back the way they came. It turned out that Wheeler had been a deputy sheriff in the area before retiring. However, he had another identity, a psychopathic killer. Bertie, who had been lured into the vehicle, had already lost her birdie life. Marie was quickly captured by Walker. Obviously, there were many psychopaths lurking in this area. Wheeler thought the bus driver had already called for help, but Danny discovered everyone's luggage. If they had left normally, they wouldn't have left their belongings behind. Shortly after, he found the bodies of the bus driver and Marie's husband. Wheeler thought someone dared to steal his prey. Soon, he casually killed Danny. Walker happened to witness the murder. Wheeler heard Marie's cry for help and quickly followed the sound, but after finding her, he lost interest. He wanted to find Walker instead. After asking about Walker's appearance and clothing, Wheeler ignored Marie and left the area. On the other side, Walker once again posed as a lost traveler and stopped a passing vehicle. The driver was a punk couple, and Walker quickly hitched a ride with them. The scene then shifts to Stacia, who discovered that many facilities in the motel were unusable, so she decided to complain to the front desk. However, the receptionist was not there, and there was only a voicemail prompt on the phone. Even the signal was intermittent. Wheeler drove to a certain location and found the body of the punk guy. Walker did not hide the body after the murder. Instead, he placed it directly on the road, seemingly provoking Wheeler. The punk girl was taken to the motel by Walker to be tortured, while Stacia was just next door. She thought her neighbors were just having fun. Later, Wheeler arrived at the motel, and soon the three of them met. Both Wheeler and Walker had ulterior motives, so Stacia couldn't get any useful information. Then the two men began to test each other. As they did so, they suddenly felt a sense of understanding. When they parted, Walker even wished Wheeler a fruitful journey. After killing the punk girl, Walker began to harass Stacia. When she realized something was wrong, she immediately ran away. The noise from her escape was heard by Wheeler, but he misjudged her location and let her escape. When Walker learned that Stacia had escaped, he quickly punctured the tires to prevent her from getting too far and began searching the nearby area. However, it was Wheeler who found Stacia first. Instead of attacking her directly, Wheeler took out his police badge and said he would help Stacia. Seeing that she didn't doubt him, Wheeler blamed everything on Walker. Stacia asked why he didn't do anything at the motel earlier, a question that Wheeler found difficult to explain. So he took the opportunity to knock her unconscious. When she woke up, she found her hands cuffed and her body tied up. Wheeler finally stopped pretending and showed his true colors. Soon after, Walker found the two of them, and Stacia was now surrounded by two psychopaths. The two men didn't immediately attack Stacia. Instead, they started telling jokes. Then Walker analyzed Wheeler's character. Although both were psychopaths, there were different types. Hearing this, Stacia suggested the two compete to determine who was better psycho. This provoked Walker, who said there was no way he could lose to an old man. During their standoff, Stacia seized the opportunity to step on the brakes. There happened to be a roadblock ahead, and both Wheeler and Walker were thrown out of the car because they weren't wearing seatbelts. Stacia was also knocked unconscious. After waking up, Walker wanted to settle the score with Stacia, but was stopped by Wheeler. It seemed that he was determined to have a final showdown with Walker, saying that he'll become the ultimate psycho king. Stacia woke up wanting to grab a gun for self-defense, but she was tied up so tightly she couldn't move. Wheeler seemed to have the upper hand and tried to attack Stacia's sexy body, only to be stopped by Walker again. In the end, both men fought to exhaustion without a clear winner, and Stacia's strength also reached its limit. The scene shifts to an ambulance passing by, picking up all three and taking away the two men's weapons. The two lunatics resumed fighting once they regained consciousness. In the midst of the brawl, Walker suddenly suggested they team up and kill the paramedics too. To their surprise, the paramedics struck first, revealing that they were also murderous psychopaths. Stacia was now in complete despair. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.